Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Al Tariq Kinney, and we are participating in our conversation about estate planning as it relates to Essex Court Surrogate. And so I'm going to give you guys a few minutes if you are on Facebook or if you are using LinkedIn or using YouTube. I'll give you some time so you can log on so you can make sure your audience is receiving the information. If you have, okay, so I think we lost one person. So today's conversation is a very unique conversation because we are happy to have authorities in this space to discuss some very, very important topics, something that will, impact all of us at some point in life. And so I'm going to give everyone an opportunity to introduce themselves. But first, let me introduce my co-host, Devere McDougall, a proud graduate of Science High School, a proud graduate of Rutgers University Law and CPA. And so he is my co-host, Devere McDougall.
Good afternoon, everyone. I appreciate everyone for everyone viewing us today. And hopefully this topic will assist you going forward. Hopefully all our topics in the past have assisted you in the estate planning arena. So hopefully today is going to be informative just as the other ones in the past were.
Great. We are blessed to have a young lady who is from New York, but she has served our wonderful county, our wonderful city, providing services. But she has a special title today, and we're going to talk more about it. Miss Keisha Burnett.
Hello, everyone. I am the acting division head for the Division of Family Assistance and Benefits. But the title that Mr. Altariq is referring to is I am the Essex County Moorkeeper, and I happen to be the only moorkeeper in the state of New Jersey.
Welcome aboard. I want to introduce a young lady who had a good fortune of being a Newark Public School graduate. Unfortunately, she went to University High School, and but she ended up going to our university. Well, I want to introduce Judge and Attorney Melinda Hawkins Taylor.
Thank you. Yes, I proudly graduated from University High, product of the Newark school system, public school system, attended Howard University, received my degree in accounting, and then went on to Rutgers Law School. I've been practicing for 20 plus years, doing probate now and estate planning.
Great. Thank you very much. I want to introduce also a friend, actually my cousin, who's been in the mortuary business for years, and he is providing some great work in terms of training young morticians to be in this space. Providing them guidance, mentorship. His name is Ron Curry. Can you introduce yourself? And also, he's a Morgan State, graduate. But we're not going to hold that against him.
Yeah, I know all of these Howard folks. It's a wonderful thing. Thank you so much for, first of all, inviting me, and it's a pleasure to be here amongst some folk who have moved on and moved into an area where we truly need you. The sisters that are here, I'm so proud of our African American women and how they're taking hold based on what has happened to many of our African American males. And even in the funeral industry, we find that there are a number of African American women coming on board and taking charge. And I'm proud of that because you all are our mothers, our new leaders. And we're here, though. We're still here, and we're doing what we can. Those of us who are providing or trying to provide opportunities for some of our other brothers and sisters in the funeral industry. But yes, I am a Morgan. an MSU, Morgan State University alum, and I'm very proud of that. And but I'm very proud, even more so, to be a member of the HBCU. So I'm happy about that.
Mhm.
Thank you, sir. And I also want to introduce two young men who are very young in this space, but have been providing services in the mortuary business as well. One happens to be a Science High School graduate, and also a gentleman who I've known for years. His name is Emmanuel, and his partner name is Ferguson. Andrew Ferguson. So you guys can introduce yourself.
Yes, my name is Emmanuel Ram. Yes, Science High alumni. Thank you much, Brother Tariq. Yes, I'm a funeral director. Been in the funeral business for about 25 years. Also is the owner of the Ferguson Ram Funeral Home, co-owner with my partner Andrew Ferguson. We opened up the last 2 years.
Great. Thank you. Andrew?
My name is Andrew Ferguson. I'm also a funeral director. Although I did not graduate or matriculate from the Essex County school system, I'm a product of Essex County. Grew up in Essex County basically all my life. Grew up in church there. My roots are there. Again, very thankful for you having us on as well.
We appreciate your ability to volunteer in the space. For those who are new to our conversation, Devera, can you give just a general overview of what we do in the surrogate's office? We're going to go right into it.
So the surrogate's court is what we call a constitutional officer, meaning that position was created in the New Jersey Constitution, and it's a dual role. So Al Tariq is the surrogate of Essex County. Each county has a surrogate, and in that role as a surrogate, it's a dual role. One is the judge of probate, which primarily means that we are responsible for making sure wills are valid, so we can probate the will and go ahead and allow the person named, which is called the executor, to go ahead and carry out the last wishes of the decedent. And if there is no will, we're responsible for making sure an administrator is appointed to handle the estate of the decedent under the New Jersey state laws, the intestate laws. And so the second responsibility of the surrogate in New Jersey is to be the deputy clerk of the Superior Court probate part. It's longer than that, but I'll just keep it that simple, which means if we cannot perform a certain task, for instance, if there's a copy of the will, we can't act. We have to then act as the deputy clerk for the Superior Court and allow a Superior Court probate part judge to make a determination of how to handle the matter. So anything related to, in essence, death of a resident of Essex County in some form or fashion will come through us, to put it in a nutshell. So, and the things that we have been doing, as I indicated earlier, is estate planning. Letting people know what estate planning is, because that's an important tool, because we are in a unique position to see that individuals haven't done any planning, and it has caused even additional stress and heartache to family members when they have to handle the loved one that passed away estate. So that's why we decided to go ahead and do this web series during COVID-19, because we were going outside and talking to people, but obviously we can't do that anymore. So now we do our best to provide and educate our constituents here in Essex County with important information.
So there was something that came up, and I know we have a unique person online. Moor keeper, I want to go into that first. What is a moor keeper, and why is that important?
A moor keeper in Essex County collaborates and works diligently with the state medical examiner's office for unclaimed bodies, or unclaimed bodies that are real, that need to be addressed. It is important, and I am honored to be the moor keeper and the only moor keeper, because there was a serious backlog and people were not claiming their relatives or friends. And it's important that an individual that was living and breathing on this earth needs to be buried with dignity and respect. So I am responsible for making the arrangement and burying them with dignity.
Thank you. So Ron.
So I think you were cutting in and out, Ms. Burnett.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Anyone in Essex County who cannot afford, I will bury the individual. It will not be a complete funeral, but I will bury them. If, because I'm also the director of the Division of Family Assistance and Benefits, which is formerly known as welfare. If a person is receiving Medicaid, I can, they can go to a funeral home. The funeral home will contact my office, and if they're eligible based upon the type of Medicaid that they receive, I will also do a Medicaid burial. The family has a maximum contribution of 1570, but I will bury them and they will also have a funeral. But you still have to contact me. If you have someone that is not at the ME's office, but at a hospital or a nursing home, and they can afford, I will take it upon myself to do the research, the paperwork, and release the body and bury the remains.
If you don't mind, Surrogate Kenny, if I can just sum up what Ms. Burnett said in the beginning, because she was going in and out. I just wanted to make sure everybody heard what she said, that Essex County is the only county in New Jersey that has a Morekeeper. The Morekeeper came into effect here in Essex County was because of the epidemic. And as everybody knows, opioid epidemic has affected the nation. But in Essex County, it was hitting us mighty hard. And so we had, the county of Essex had determined that we need to do a better job to ensure that people who remains were at the medical examiner's office didn't stay there because it was a health and safety issue, but also it was a matter of ensuring that people who may not have passed away in dignity at least had some dignity in their burial and didn't have their remains stand at the medical examiners for months and possibly even years at a time because family members didn't claim them. So Essex County took it upon themselves to make sure we had somebody who was responsible to ensure people were properly buried. And so that's why the position of Morekeeper came into effect in Essex County. And it was a good thing that was in effect with COVID-19 because it made it easier for us to handle the terrible amount of loss that we had. Well over 1,500 people have passed away from COVID-19 in Essex County, but having a Morekeeper made that easier for us to handle any individual that may not have family members who were willing to bury them. So I just want to kind of make sure everybody understood why the Morekeeper came in effect and the importance of the Morekeeper here in Essex County.
So to Judge Taylor, regarding as it relates to estate planning, is estate planning and burial, like, can you give some explanation if that's critically important? Why is that important? How can you make that sort of determination, or those sort of things happen prior to being deceased?
Sure, it is so important. I wish individuals would do some type of estate planning. Estate planning is just another word to say I want to make arrangements in case of my death. What do I want to happen? Who do I want my house to go to? Who would I like to have receive my car? And all of that is placed in the will. That's where all of your assets are distributed. And it would save your family so much money if there was a will in place. But most of the time, there are no wills in place, so we have to go without the will. But the estate planning, the will is part of the estate planning. So you have the will, which would state who's in charge of administering your estate. You would have where all of the assets would go. Also part of that estate planning would be your power of attorney. Power of attorney is who's handling your business for you, but that's while you're alive because it ends when you pass. Who's making health decisions for you in a power of attorney? Again, that's while you're alive and it stops when you pass. Now, who is going to make funeral arrangements for you? That will come in terms of you nominating a representative, a funeral representative. Now that funeral representative could be, and again, we're still talking about the estate planning, could be a family member. mean, you could put your desire for a funeral representative in your will, but you have to wait approximately 10 days before you can even go forward with the will. So you want to be able to have a document where your representative signed off and they know that they're in charge of your funeral arrangement. So that's a separate document. Normally I make that separate. So in this appointment of representative, they're basically making the decisions in terms of your funeral arrangement. And in that document also, which is crucial, it states where sources of funds can be found to bury you, because a lot of times individuals may have insurance policies and the family can't even find it. So along with the will, the power of attorney for health and business, you also want to nominate a funeral representative. And then lastly, with that estate planning, and I can go into detail if there are any questions in regards to each document, but I'm just giving you an overall view. You want to also have a letter of instruction. Those are really itemized detail as to what funeral home, if you did not make pre-funeral arrangements, where would you like to be buried? Who would you like to, your family to contact? Very personal decisions, things that would not go in the will, you put it in the letter of instructions. So in terms of your estate planning, you may have a will or a trust that's even more powerful depending on your assets. Power of attorney for health and business, nominate your funeral representative along with an appointment for your funeral representative.
Thank you very much. I want to bring on Ron, because I think that the information regarding funeral arrangements is critical. And I also want, I would like to also to have Andrew and Emmanuel answer as well. But Ron, can you give us some insight as to why having a will or why having a pre-burial arrangements is critically important in your space, in your business? You know, how does it help? You know, not having what impact does it have to the family?
Well, one of the things that I'm finding more and more, and this even happened within our own family, Surrogate, we had a will, and I'm going to use our family as an example. There was a will, and there was a lot of acres available. Somehow or another, my grandfather prepared a will, and somehow or another, he had a friend who was, I'd say she was 36. My grandfather at the time was 86. But she basically stated that the child that she had, who was 5 years old, meaning I had a 5-year-old uncle, if you would, 5-year-old uncle, and that stayed in court for a number of years, for 9 years, because she contested the land that was left to our family. So be it as it may, wills are good in some instances, and probably I need to lean on our attorney to kind of clarify a way to get around problems like contestability when it comes to a will. One of the things that I have found and that I've communicated to some of our families was to make sure there was a clause, and I may stand to be corrected, but to put a clause in there that if anyone contests the will, then they would immediately be negated from that will. So I've had good and bad experiences with the process of having a will written out for your families. So I have
let me jump in. Let me jump in with that piece before you go on to that. Let me jump in. So with a will can be always contested. There's nothing you can do to uncontest, to not have anybody contest. It's like a lawsuit. As long as you have the appropriate money to pay for the the fee to do an application or complaint or petition, anybody can start a lawsuit. Anybody can contest the will. The question is whether they're going to win or not. So that is not that is not a good enough reason not to have a will for planning. I think Melinda will probably agree with that. So that the purpose of a will is not to avoid a lawsuit. And when you talk about that, clause to prevent people from contesting the will, I put it this way: in most states, that clause means nothing. You can do that. It's called the interregnum clause. You can put that in the will, but depending on what state you're in, it means nothing. People can contest the will if they choose to contest the will. So I get what you're saying. I know it has caused problems with families, but I want to make sure our viewers know that estate planning and having a will is very important. And yes, Mr. Curry is absolutely correct. It doesn't mean it's not going to prevent lawsuits, and it might cause you some headaches, but it's going to be less headaches with the will for your loved ones than having a will.
Yes,
Yeah,
more times than not.
Also, if I might add, I've been doing this for a number of years. I've never seen, it may be another state possibly in terms of it lasting 9 years. In New Jersey, they push those cases to end a little quicker than that. And also in terms of the will itself, that's one of the reasons why you may want to, sit down with an attorney and do a will properly, because what the attorney will do will go through the ifs and what if this person gets that and what if this person dies first, because it may be sometimes that you may not need a will, you need to go a little further and get a trust when you're dealing with a lot of family members or special needs or out of state. You may want to file you may want to prepare a trust with the attorney, which will give you a lot more options than a will.
So, Emmanuel,
let me say this. Let me just make this one point. Specifically, that was in the state of South Carolina. And it turned out to be a big mess. I never suggest to a family not to get a will. I'm just expressing my personal feelings because I watched it go on within our family. Certainly, it worked out that way, but certainly we don't want to discourage anyone from having a will prepared. It's just that I find a lot of times in our community or in our communities that sometimes we don't have those resources. There's not that much within our realm when you talk about financial or economic stability within our own community. So I find that as well. You may disagree or agree with that, but this is what I'm finding. And
but
a lot
also,
of it has to do with education too. So
right. It's a matter. I'm sorry. Also, it's a matter too, I find, of individuals not wanting to deal with the topic.
Let me pull in Andrew and Emmanuel, because I wanted to talk about, that we've experienced a high number of deaths that happened in Essex County, and also Portia, who is one of our viewers, talked about funeral directors in regards to pre-planning. And I'm not sure if you experienced a high number of individuals who, passed during the last 2 or 3 months. How did it benefit, the family who had pre-burial arrangements? And how did it hurt, individuals who did not have pre-burial arrangements? Can you speak to that issue, what the benefits are of having pre-burial arrangements?
Yeah, so even to
also explain what that means first. Explain what pre-burial arrangements are, and then explain what the benefits are, if you could do that.
Absolutely. So kind of to even go back and kind of tie everything in together, I really believe I always start off when I do pre-arrangement seminars. I always start off with, we as people, we plan for everything, whether it be something small as far as what are you going to wear the next day, whether it be something large like maybe planning a birthday event or maybe planning a wedding or buying a house. We make preparations for things. And those things are not certain. We don't have to get married. We might not make it to our next birthday. Our plans may change for the next day. However, one thing is certain, that we will pass from here one day. So, and really, when you think about it, that is really the only decision that we kind of are a little hesitant to make, especially dealing with that amount of money. Making funeral arrangements is probably one of the only things that you'll sit with for maybe 1 or 2 hours and really make decisions about thousands of dollars that quickly. So we always encourage you to do prearrangements. Just like the attorney was saying, there are many, many different things to put in place that go along with the prearrangements. For instance, I know she was saying having a funeral representative, but there's something that New Jersey has introduced called the funeral agent that supersedes the next of kin. And basically what that person is someone, just like she was explaining, that is in charge of those said funeral arrangements. They're not in charge of your estate. They're not in charge of anything like that, but they're specifically just in charge of making those funeral arrangements. And New Jersey has provided us a form that she was speaking of that does document all those things and can be a part of the addendum to the will, so that you will have that in place. What basically funeral arrangements are, there are two types. There's one that I like to refer to as a wish list. That one is a non-funded funeral arrangement. Basically, you would sit with a licensed funeral professional and talk about exactly what it is that you want to have done at the funeral. Whether it be, the casket you can select the cemetery, you can select, things from small details as to the song that you want to have, to major details as if you want to have something like a horse and carriage, something like that. There's also what's called a pre-funded funeral arrangements. There's two types. There are some for those that are on public assistance or Medicaid. That is called a irrevocable trust account, and there's one that's called a revocable trust account. The main difference on those two are the revocable trust account kind of works more or less like a bank account, which means you can put money in and you can take money out. The irrevocable trust account works as it's specifically for those that are on Medicaid. And those people that are on Medicaid, that is one of the things that the state kind of excludes from the Medicaid spend down. So you can't put monies into that account to prepare for your funeral services if you're on Medicaid. Again, we recommend that everyone does that because it does create less of a burden for your family. It does create a sense of you're getting what it is that you want, as opposed to someone else kind of picking things out, and then it kind of leaves your family with peace of mind. They know what funeral director you want to go to. They know exactly what it is that you want it, and they don't have to say, well, we think she would do this or we think he would do that. It's kind of already laid out. And then, of course, the financial piece of it as well. Now, there are also two types of those. There are a guaranteed and there are unguaranteed funeral arrangements. So the guaranteed would lock in the prices, and then the unguaranteed does not lock in the prices. But the good thing is, at least with the New Jersey Prepaid Trust Fund, which is governed by the New Jersey State Funeral Directors Association, it does accrue interest every year, and that interest is meant to kind of cover the cost of inflation. Just like if you were to sit down with any of us funeral directors and plan a funeral now, I can guarantee you in 5 years, 10 years from now, that the cost is going to be more expensive than it is now. So that interest is built to kind of offset those costs of inflation. Now, as far as, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I want to go back into the cost, because you also said there's a cost that can go based on, the year that you decided to do these arrangements. What is the average cost for a funeral?
Well, I think that is a loaded question. So I think that first off, there are many, many, many factors deciding that. Just like you can go to ShopRite and you can get a pack of chicken, not to compare a deceased person to chicken, but if you can go there and you can buy $2.99 for something, or you can go to Whole Foods and you could pay $5.99 for something. So, you kind of got to.
Let's use cars. Let's use cars.
Cars.
Having a Honda versus a Cadillac.
So when you go to a Honda, there's nothing wrong with a Honda. It'll get you from point A to point B.
Got you. Okay.
Drive a Mercedes, it's a lot more luxurious. A good example is when you go to take the car for a service. When you take the car for service at a Chevy or a Honda dealership, if your car breaks down, you usually have to call them, and they tell you when to come in. If you have a Mercedes, most of the time, the car is going to tell you when to come in. You're going to be met, or sometimes they'll even pick the car up. They'll have a lounge waiting for you. They might have some food to offer you, or you might not even set foot in there, and they might just drop the loaner car off to you. So I think my point in saying that is, you're gonna get what you pay for. So the
Got it.
level of
Okay.
service is different. The level of attention to detail will be different. But I'm just going to throw a number out there and say that it's going to really depend on the cemetery as well. A lot of people hear these high numbers of funeral costs, but don't really take into consideration that the cemetery is a big factor in that. When you talk about a cemetery, the average cemetery cost, especially if you use one that requires a vault, you're going to be somewhere between $5,000 and $7,000, and that's before you get to a funeral home. So I'm seeing that the prices right now are averaging, depending on the cemetery that you go to, from between $15,000 and upper $20,000, depending on where it is you're going. Again, if you go to a mausoleum, you can go to a mausoleum and spend $10,000 to $15,000 just on the crypt before you have made a phone call and say, "Hey, I need you to take care of my funeral arrangements." So just imagine those things. So when you ask how much a funeral costs, it's a very, very loaded question. It's a very loaded question.
Got it.
So let me ask you a question. It won't be as loaded.
Okay.
When you talked about the plans, you said revocable, irrevocable. As attorneys, we look at those terms meaning differently. So when you say revocable, that means you have the option to eliminate it. And irrevocable means it stays in place. You can't. There's some exceptions to the rule, but basically means that plan stays in place and nothing you can do about it once you put it in place. Is that the same thing with these plans?
Yes.
When you say revocable versus irrevocable?
Yes. So basically, the irrevocable, again, was set up for the purposes of the Medicaid program. So with Medicaid, when you go on Medicaid, you have to do a spin down if you have any assets. So they created this irrevocable account for those people that are going on Medicaid, so you can put monies into that revocable account. But there are clauses. So let's say that the funeral, let's say you have about $30,000 to burn. In a revocable, if you decided that you did wanted a funeral for $30,000 and you put that in there, and then your family decides you don't have a will, and your family decides, hey, we're just going to do a direct cremation. The direct cremation is not going to cost necessarily $30,000. So in a revocable account, the family would be entitled to receive a refund check for whatever the difference is. If it was the irrevocable account to kind of cut down on Medicaid fraud, some people will say, okay, well, we're just going to hide this $30,000 here, and then when grandma passes away, we'll just go ahead and say we're going to get the bare bones funeral and spend maybe $10,000 to $12,000, and then take the rest of the money back, and then we kind of circumvent Medicaid. But in the irrevocable account, that does not happen. So if you spend $30,000 sitting inside the trust account, and it's a revocable account, and you decide that I'm only going to spend $10,000 or $12,000, you don't get the money back. The state gets the money back. So the money goes to the state.
Keisha, you want to? I saw you had some. You wanted to say something, Keisha?
No, I was gonna let him. He was doing a great job. He was absolutely right. It's called.
I have a question. I have a question for you, Keisha, because what he talked about kind of relates a little bit to you in terms of when somebody does a Medicaid or SSI burial, can family contribute, and how much can they contribute if their family member was buried using Medicaid funds or SSI funds?
The family can contribute a maximum of $1,570.
Okay.
1,570.
1,570.
Okay.
But the one thing I do want to add to what Andrew was saying is that the person with the irrevocable trust or non-irrevocable trust, the other piece to that is they have to also be receiving Medicare.
Right.
Okay, so they first are receiving Medicare, and now let's say because they have to go into a facility, now they're coming to me for the supplemental for the Medicaid. So it's a very tedious process to obtain that type of Medicaid because you have to give back we're going to do a 5-year look back. Like you were saying, with the family hiding money, no, you're not going to hide the money. We're going to find it. Because we do a 5-year look back with all the bank accounts, all of the stocks, bonds, and a lot of people, unfortunately, are just ineligible. because they have tried to hide the money. And say, for instance, I have $100,000. I didn't have a will. I didn't do any kind of prepare. I definitely didn't prepare to have a stroke, and now I have to be in a facility. So what I did was, I told my child, go put the money in the kid's name. There's going to be a penalty for that. There's going to be a severe penalty for that. And like he said, a lot of times the money, I will come back and get my money for all of that.
She's not
I'll
lying.
pay with Medicaid for. I will come get the money.
I would just like to add,
Does that.
I would just like to add one thing on what was said, and someone touched on spin down. Another way, sometimes individuals will inherit money and they're receiving governmental assistance. And what I normally do is when I'm working with someone and they're the administrator or the executor, I always ask for the beneficiaries, are any of them receiving any governmental assistance? Why? Because the amount of money that you receive or you may have inherited, it may impact the assistance that you're receiving. So what we will do is they will use some of that money, the beneficiary who's receiving the governmental assistance, they will use that money to set up a pre-arrangement for their funeral. And that's part of it. I had one individual last month, he was receiving $50,000 from an inheritance. And he used $7,000 to make funeral arrangements. So sometimes when you inherit money and you're receiving governmental assistance, you have to spend it down, as was stated, not only through pre-funeral, but you may sometimes even, he was able to purchase new furniture. It's a certain allowance you're able to do in certain categories. So I just wanted to bring that up. The pre-funeral arrangements can also be made through beneficiaries who are receiving governmental assistance.
Ron, and I want to, because you've been in this business, for years, regarding, regarding, of course, there's been a spike in number of deaths that happened over the past few months. And I'm sure you've seen a number of new cases that came your way. How does pre-burial arrangements help in your space, in the business that is that something that you would recommend for people to create, in their space, and how does that impact you? How would that impact, getting someone into the ground when they need to be buried?
One of the things, first of all, to answer your question, it's an excellent way to eliminate some of the pitfalls when families come in. They may not know where the policies are. They may not have had that conversation with the family members that will be left behind. But when they have a pre-need arrangement, it just simplifies everything. We don't have to worry about sitting down and making a whole new arrangement, go through a whole new arrangement process. The burial is already taken care. Normally in our industry, there's approximately a 4% inflation rate. So that's calculated in as well, because it does accrue interest over time. So there's a number of benefits that come along with families making those pre-need arrangements, or individuals making their own pre-need arrangements. And so when they come in and they expire, the loved one expires, the family can come in with ease. Now, they may want to make some adjustments. They may want to add a few things. They may want to take some things away. But it really simplifies the entire arrangement process. So certainly we want to encourage our families, and we do. Those that, will call us and say, hey, listen, I want to make my pre-need arrangements. And trust and believe, we truly, truly welcome that, because it just simplifies things. And another thing, you have some family members that want to know where the money is. And when you have those pre-need arrangements, especially if they're irrevocable, there's really not too much that they can do. I've never really had a family come back to me and say, well, we want to take this off. But if I have to redo the arrangements, and I have from time to time with families, And if there's a refund that they deserve to have, then we certainly will refund whatever it is that we need to refund back to them. But from a beneficial point of view, yes, prenatal arrangements are truly the way to go.
Now,
And I
know
prefer that. Go ahead. I'm
No,
sorry.
I know Andrew chose not to answer the question. How much is a Honda funeral arrangement versus Cadillac funeral arrangement? If you don't mind me asking.
Wow. Well,
I
you
didn't
know,
refuse to answer the question.
Andrew and Ram. I'll tell you like this: Andrew and Ram, they are up there where the money lies. They're in Bergen County.
Okay.
So you know they're
so
doing
are
quite
you in
well up there.
Somerset.
So I'm going to answer that question. I'm gonna use them.
You're not in
First of
Essex
all,
County either, Mr. Curry.
I know, but I do a lot of work in Essex County, though. You
We
know
do
that, right?
too.
We do too.
All right. Well, I'm just gonna tell it like it is. We have set the bar kind of high. We have, and Ram has worked with me, and Andrew to some degree as well. I kind of consider them sons of mine in the funeral industry, to tell you the God's honest truth. And we talked about this, where we know our prices are probably some of the highest in the industry. But keeping this in mind, I used to teach at Mercer County College, mortuary science, and 90% of my students were of European persuasion. And I asked them one day to bring in all of their price lists from the funeral homes that they work for, including SCI, which is the corporate conglomerate. And when we averaged those prices out, they were far greater than the prices in Essex County. And that kind of blew me away. And we know the answers. I don't have to get into that. But what we did, we sat down and we generated an average, and we even took our own peers, funeral homes that are in Essex County and some of the other areas, even New York, and we came up with a pretty good price. So now, to answer the question, I would say our funerals, depending whether or not it is a cremation. Let's break that down. Average cremation with us, service with a cremation, that means they have the funeral, they have the wake, they have the funeral, and then we cremate their loved one. Those are averaging roughly about $7,000, averaging. Sometimes 4, sometimes 5. You know, we're flexible because we understand our customers' needs. We really do, and we're not going to try to take a price list and shove it down their throat. It's easier to go lower than to go higher. But if it's a burial, and I want you to pay close attention to this, we don't own the cemeteries. That's very important. Now in the cemeteries, I'll give you a couple examples. Glendale, in Bloomfield, you're not coming out of there without spending $6,000-7,000. That's including the vault. But the grave and the vault, it's about $6,000-7,000. We get a family coming in saying, listen, we want to go to Glendale. Okay, we can go to Glendale. This is the cost. They never argue that, but they will argue our cost. But I make sure that my price is structured and they understand that we work for you for 4 days, putting it simply or mildly, and they work for half an hour. And you don't ask them for a discount, but you'll ask us for a discount. So we have structured our prices to make sure that it benefits not only just the funeral director, but also the family. And that's very, very important because we have this mindset that we don't need to get paid, but our bills are so much higher. And so we charge. So here's, I'll tell you what mine is. I don't know how many people are watching this, but we believe in a first-class quality service. You know, so you have an option. You shop. You may want to shop at Walmart, which I do, and I may want to go to Fifth Avenue, which I do. And I think that I have that prerogative. But if you provide people the quality of a service, they're coming to you and know that may not or may think we're too expensive, then they'll go somewhere else. And I really don't have a problem. It is not easy surviving as the only African American entrepreneur in Westfield, New Jersey. And trust me, it's not. It's a little more difficult surviving in Somerset, New Jersey. But those those are the type of customers that we support. But we'll serve anybody. I've buried somebody for as little as $3,000, but I've buried somebody for as much as 16, 17, $18,000. They may want all the bells and whistles, and I'm not ashamed of that because we have to as entrepreneurs in our community, we have to survive. But I always tell Ram, what they're paying for. So those are the numbers. I know Andrew didn't want to answer, but it's okay, Andrew. I'll take the heat today. But that's what it is.
Thank you. I appreciate it because like during this time we've seen a number. We've had a conversation. I think it was during we were celebrating the beginning of Ramadan, and we actually had a sister who was a Muslim out of Trenton, but she also has a funeral parlor here in Newark.
One of my students.
Okay, and we were talking about the funeral arrangements and the pricing structure, and it was stated to us that there was a spike increase, and I'm sure that there's regulations that probably had to be honored during this COVID-19 situation. Have you guys witnessed or seen an increase in pricing because of COVID-19, or any regulations that people need to be aware of because of COVID-19, so people can prepare for that?
Well,
Emmanuel, you want to address that, or
I'm
Andrew?
sorry, it's raining where I am, so I don't know if it's too loud. But basically, we're regulated by the FTC. So when you go into a funeral home, just like Mr. Curry was saying, you have options. So before you sign a contract, before you do anything, we are mandated by law to hand you a copy of what's called our general price list. Also, I was kind of looking while Mr. Curry was speaking. Someone in the comments was saying that they might have a policy for $100,000, and if the funeral director knows that, they will go ahead and try to take all of the $100,000. That's not the case. This is why we are regulated. So the price is the price is the price. No matter if you have a $10,000 policy or if you have $1 million policy. So I just want to kind of disparage that rumor. But when you come in, we have to give you a general price list. So all of our prices are going to be listed on those things. So to answer your question, we cannot just, if a family comes in or if we see an increase and stuff like that, we cannot just say, because it's supply and demand, we're going to raise the price, or price gouge. We cannot do that. We're heavily regulated. Even the humanistic side, if I could be totally 100% honest with you, just like the attorney was saying, you can't prepare for these things. COVID-19 was devastating, and it still is devastating to families. So you had people that were healthy individuals. I had some individuals who the doctor said that they would be off the ventilator because they were so young, and they passed away. So, people were not expecting these things. So I personally was one of those ones that were kind of given more or less of a discount because of the situation happening, because it was not a planned thing. Not that, you plan for death, but, or you can, plan for, when you're going to demise. But, it was not something that we could say, okay, well, at least he was sick, or we saw this coming, so it was more of a thing of, we were really kind of discounting things. And even to say that, families would call and they would say, well, you know what, because we're, as we all know, that the government put into an order, the executive order, at one point we could only have, if you were in Essex County, 5 people, but, because we were not in Essex County, 10 people. So, it was very heartbreaking to be able to have to tell a family that their loved one that has 10 kids or 5 grandchildren, that you had to decide which one of them can be in the funeral. So, my heart really kind of went out to them. So even with that, we were under regulation. So people would call us and say, well, because we're having an abbreviated funeral, does that mean that we have an abbreviated cost? So just like Mr. Curry said, people don't question the cemetery. The cemetery was backed up and having us to calls to wait 2 and 3 weeks before we can get an appointment to the cemetery. And it's still kind of that bad now. But they would not question their prices, but they would question us. And again, if you really think about it, COVID is unknown to the living, and it's unknown to us as well. We were giving guidelines to it, but we were really doing more work and putting ourselves at more risk to try to make sure that the loved ones would get some kind of closure to this unknown disease that's going around. So even with that, we really are, we're individuals and we're human. So we don't necessarily just take advantage. We don't take advantage of people.
Right.
I can't speak for all funeral directors,
Sure.
but I can speak for at least, I believe, the 3 that are on here right now.
Melinda,
we don't do that.
Melinda, let me pull you in for a second, because Devera and I talked about this, and so clarify the myth, and also Ron and Andrew can also clarify as well, that if I die, my wife is to take my insurance policy and give that insurance policy over to the funeral director, and they're able to carve out a funeral that's proper for me. Is that something does that happen? Is that something that you recommend? Like, provide.
Okay.
Let me add to that question first. Let me add to that question, because I know exactly where he's at with that. And I want to let people understand why the question came about. As I indicated earlier, surrogate court is in a unique position to see families come in at some of the worst times in their life. And oftentimes, we do have individuals that come up, and I'm not going to mention names, but funeral home representatives or representatives of the funeral home, bringing them in here, and they often say they made me sign over the insurance policy to them. And as the surrogate saying, we don't say anything to them because that's not our place. But when we do go out and do our talks, we always bring up this subject about insurance policy. So, because insurance policies and contract, that's why we're asking the attorney to explain how insurance policies work and whose money it is, and do they have to sign it over like bearer paper?
Okay, this comes up a whole lot, of course, because as was stated, insurance policies are contracts, and in those contracts, there are named beneficiaries. Sometimes beneficiaries are the spouses. I've had where they're not the spouses. It may be a cousin, it may be a friend. That's required to use the insurance money to pay for a funeral. Normally, someone would name someone like a spouse, believing that, of course, they're going to do the right thing and use the insurance. And then the insurance, and then the funeral home will then will allow them to sign a document and contact the insurance company so that they can get paid. And any balance left over will then go to the beneficiary. That is not the best way to, because you don't know if that person will sign or not. I've had some individuals who will name their estate or the trust as the beneficiary. And that's where your pre-planning will come in. But having insurance and naming someone, that is not guaranteed that they're going to use the money the way you want them to in terms of funeral, and they're not necessarily obligated. And then the second thing is, one thing I want to touch upon is, we've all been talking about family making arrangements. That's not always the case. Sometimes, for whatever reasons, individuals become estranged from their family. And you would be surprised at the number of people who become family to their neighbors, or you have someone who they're estranged from their wife and the sibling takes care of them. There is an order of priority in New Jersey as to who can bury the deceased. I've had several funeral homes call me up and say, oh, we have a deceased here and we have someone who passed. We believe that he's married, but they haven't seen the wife in 2 years and the sister want to bury him. I've had another funeral home call me and say, oh, he's estranged from his children, but his next door neighbor is like a daughter to him, and she's here and she wants to bury him. There was no insurance policies there, but they showed me copies of bank statements. So we had to go into court, get special permission for the neighbor to bury them, use the funds from the bank statements to bury this particular person. It can be done, but it's a lot more work than pre-planning. It's a lot more work than if you had some type of estate planning in place. So I hope that answers your question in terms of the insurance policy. That's not the best way to handle it, hoping that your monies will be used. It's really not, in my opinion.
You just touched on another subject that I'd like to kind of elaborate on for everybody. So yes, it is possible for non-family members to bury somebody, but in those cases, you have to come to court. And as the judge is indicating, and the way to do that, I mean, you could do it on your own. I'm always honest with people. You can do it on your own, but it becomes more complicated. Part of the reason why it's even more complicated, even if you're smart enough to understand and know what to do, because I never think anybody's not smart enough to do it, but emotions are involved at that time. That's what makes it even more difficult. So a lot of times I always suggest, in this case, get an attorney. An attorney can always file what we call an orders of cause and verify complaint with the surrogate's court. And then we schedule a hearing date when that judge can then the probate part judge can make a determination if he wants to allow friends and family to bury them, because it happens all the time. Friends and family do decide to whether it's a friend from church or a co-worker. I've seen it come through the surrogate's court where the application comes through to ask the probate part judge to allow them to bury their friend. And the judges will allow for what we call temporary administration for the limited purpose of burial only. They may not make you the general administrator to handle the whole estate, but the judge is willing to do that because the judge understands that we all deserve dignity in death as well. And so if you have a friend or family member that you're willing, and I got to say this, and understand, you may not get that money back that you spend for the funeral. So understand that if you're going to do this, because that individual may not have money in their estate to pay you back. So if you're going to do this out of the goodness of your heart, understand that. But the judge is willing to do that because he or she is human just like the rest of us and want to make sure people have dignity in death. So it is possible. So although we do have statutes that determine who's first in line to want to administer estates, but also to bury individual, because the spouse is always first or domestic partner. But there is a way to do it. And if you ever want to do it, definitely talk to an attorney like Judge Taylor, Hawkins Taylor, or any other attorney that handles estate planning or estate administration.
Yeah, because like you stated, not only is there the emotions going on because you have an individual who's not buried, and each day, they're being charged to keep the body. So you have the cost that's incurring every day because the family member has not stepped up. You have the emotional aspect of it. And like you said, yes, you can do it on your own, but it is a lot of work. In the instance that I performed in terms of getting the neighbor and the sibling to do it, yes, you have to file paper in the surrogate's office. And I actually went down to the probate court and I sat for 2-3 hours so that the court could squeeze me in for the day because I knew it was very emotional and we got it done in a couple of days. You also have to contact, an agency called Unclaimed because they may look for the next of kin. They're going to give the court a report as to where the wife may be or whoever's next to kin. So yes, there are certain forms you can do, but in certain circumstances, if you want to eliminate costs, you want to keep the costs lower, the emotional aspect, you should seek out someone to assist you with the nuances of this.
Thank you. I know we have a minute left, and so this is a very, very interesting conversation, about transition. Something that we all face, whether we face it with family, friends. Something that we have to be more aware of. When it's our time to transition into another phase. I'm going to give the final words to if there's any final comments that you would like to share. In this thread, I'd like Keisha start off. Is there any final thoughts?
First of all, I want to say thank you. I enjoyed sharing the panel with everyone. Please, and I really would wish people would plan. I really do. Because it's just so difficult. The other thing I wanted to mention is the judge mentioned about when someone is receiving public assistance. In particular, in the state of New Jersey, if you're receiving cash assistance for a single adult, which is general assistance, when you apply, you sign forms stating that you will, if you come into a lump sum of money, we're going to intercede and intercept that money, and whatever's left, we will give you. So I just wanted people to be aware of that. It's in particular general assistance, not so much TANF. And once again, people plan and stay healthy and safe. And thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Keisha. Melinda?
Oh, I would just like to thank you for allowing me to be a part of it. I love enjoying and I enjoy educating my community. I was raised in Newark, went through the system, and I enjoy giving back. So I welcome any other opportunity.
Thank you very much. Andrew and Emmanuel?
Well, again, we want to thank you for having us on. Again, we hope that something was said, and if you have any questions, you can feel free to reach out to us. Our website is up here. We have some information on there that speaks to pre-planning. If you have any questions, you can feel free to contact us. We're more than willing to sit down with you and help you if you have any questions to answer. And again, we also welcome any other opportunities that you have. You know, we're always available and looking to help our community as well. So we thank you.
No, thank you very much. Oh, I'm sorry. Emmanuel, apologize. Emmanuel?
No, just like my partner said, if you have any questions, feel free. It doesn't matter. Don't wait till the last minute when you come into the funeral home. You don't know what you have to do, or you don't know the pricing. Come talk to us now. We just nothing but a phone call away, and we'd be happy to help you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And
Cousin Ron?
And certainly, I want to piggyback on what Emmanuel just communicated in his discourse. We're here for you. I know sometimes people come out and they say, well, don't go to that funeral home because they're way too expensive. But there's one important thing that I want people to know is that whether you use us or not, you can call us anytime. And if you have some questions, we'll be more than happy to answer them. We don't believe in trying to take advantage of folk. We know that everybody is different. Everybody's money is different. And the first thing that I ask my customers or my families is, where would you like to be? What cemetery would you like to go to? I'm never interested in how much money you have. I never ask you. I never want to find out or know how much your insurance policy is. We're here to work with you. And our first commitment to our families, and I've taught this to all of my students, your first commitment is to serve. So thank you so much. I was able to gain a lot of information from all of you, and it was a pleasure. Truly, truly was a pleasure. And I certainly plan on reaching out to each and every one of you. Keisha, I know, the judge, Mr. McDougal, right? Is that your name? Okay.
McDougal, yep.
And certainly Al Tariq. And Andrew, you were very good. Thank you. I'm very happy with you and Emmanuel. So thanks so much. Okay.
Hey, before you get off, I have a request. There was a teacher that was online. She's been online. She comes to our website every single week when we have these conversations, and she has a request. She says, and I'm adding Melinda to this conversation as well, and Keisha. Do either businesses take on high school students as interns to volunteer or just talk about the industry? I think that would be a great, way to have a conversation with young people to ensure that more people have an interest in this space, whether they want to be an attorney, whether they want to serve as a moorkeeper one day, whether they want to go into the mortuary science business. This is something that I just want to make sure that I put that request out there.
If I may, I actually have a call tomorrow with the state.
Okay.
Regarding being the moorkeeper and standardizing procedures, I will bring that up, and I would be willing to do some mentoring.
Good. We have one internship. Good. Next.
Listen, I'm more than willing to take on young students because this is one of the last frontiers that we have as an African American business. Outside of the barbershop, I know we have some law firms and things of that nature, but I'm always looking for interns and people who are interested in funeral service because we need more.
Sure.
So
same goes for
anytime.
us. We welcome. Please reach out to us. We'd be happy to take some people on. Us as being kind of the younger guys in the industry, we can kind of give you some advice on what to do and maybe what not to do, and answer some questions. We'd be happy, to hear from you. So if you have any questions, again, please reach out to us. We're only a phone call away. We're not just here for when a death occurs, but we are really part of the community.
Yes.
We are here to help you guys in any way that we can.
Thank you very
Amen.
much. Appreciate
Amen.
you.
I am a strong believer that to whom much is given, much is required.
Yes.
So I have no problem. I had a women's Christmas party at my office, and I invited 10 high schoolers, females, to just come and mingle with other African American business owners, female business owners. And one was supposed to intern until this COVID hit. So yes, I am open to volunteers and interns or, whoever may be interested.
And also, if I could just add one more thing. Also, if there are some high school students that are interested in pursuing a career in mortuary science, I don't really say this too much, but I'm a proud member of the National Funeral Directors Association, where I do sit on the National Education Commission as one of the youngest people and people of color on the board. So I'm always representing us. There are scholarships out there for those that want to go. So I would be happy to talk to people about that and get people involved in that too. So if you really want to do it, please let us know. Like I said, our first thing is we want to give back. And just like she said, to whom much is given, much is required. So, we want to make sure that we pass things back along to our community.
To everyone, thank you for giving up your time. I know some of you guys are sitting in the rain, in the middle of rain. I know some of you, sacrifice, your lunch, just so you can offer words in terms of informing our public. And for those who watch, who stayed with us, thank you for giving us your time and attention. And please come back next week. We have another series on our estate planning, and hopefully you guys can come back. But if you have interest in interning at any one of those spaces, you can reach out to our office. We can forward that information to each one of the representatives, or you can just reach out to them directly. But we definitely want to make sure we take advantage of this opportunity where we can actually help people, in the industry that they want to be a part of to become what they plan to become. So again, thank you everyone for your time and attention. Have a great day and stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.